Right, let's talk about something properly important. This is about a piece of kit that genuinely changed the world. I'm talking about the Sturmgewehr 44, the STG 44. If you've never heard of it, well, frankly, you should have. This wasn't just another rifle churned out by the Germans in a desperate attempt to win a war they were clearly losing. This was a revolution. It was the automotive equivalent of someone inventing the V8 engine when everyone else was still mucking about with one-lungers. This rifle, you see, was more than just wood and metal. It was an idea, a brilliant, terrifyingly effective idea. Before the STG-44, soldiers were basically given a choice. A rifle that was slow but accurate at a distance, or a submachine gun that sprayed bullets like a garden hose but was about as accurate as a drunken darts player beyond spitting distance. The STG-44 looked at that choice and said, "9! We can do better!" And it did. It fundamentally altered how soldiers fought, how they were equipped, and how engineers thought about designing firearms for decades to come. It was, quite simply, a game changer. Think about it. World War II, a global punch-up of epic proportions. And, in the middle of all that chaos, some very clever German chaps, probably fueled by schnapps and desperation, came up with this. Now, to understand why the STG-44 was such a big deal, you need to picture the average soldier back in the early days of World War II. Your typical infantryman, whether he was British, American, Russian or German, was usually armed with a bolt-action rifle. Think of the Lee Enfield, the Mosin Nagant or the Karabiner 98K. These were sturdy, reliable things, accurate enough to hit a man-sized target at hundreds of yards. The problem was you had to work a bolt every single time you wanted to fire a shot. Click-clack-bang, click-clack-bang. Not exactly rapid fire, is it? Then you had the submachine guns. The Thompson, the MP40, the PPS-41. These were fantastic for close-quarters stuff, for clearing out rooms or trenches. They spat out pistol-caliber bullets at an alarming rate, like an angry wasp. But, and it's a big but, try hitting anything with them much beyond 50 meters. So the German military boffins put their thinking caps on. This wasn't a case of simply tweaking an existing design. They needed something fundamentally new. Early prototypes emerged, known as Maschinenkarabiner, or MKB for short. These were the first steps towards the assault rifle concept. Two main contenders surfaced, the MKB-42H from Henel and the MKB-42W from Walter. They were tested on the Eastern Front, where combat showed what worked and what didn't. The feedback from the soldiers was crucial, and they generally liked what they saw, even if the early models were a bit rough around the edges. So, what was it about the STG-44 that made it so revolutionary? Well, first and foremost, it was a select-fire rifle. That means the soldier could choose between firing single shots for accuracy or unleashing a torrent of fully automatic fire for when things got a bit too close for comfort. This was a massive advantage. Most soldiers at the time had one or the other, but not both, in a single manageable package. The STG-44 gave the individual infantryman a level of firepower previously only available from light machine guns, but in a much handier format. It was like having a scalpel and a sledgehammer in the same toolkit. Another clever bit was how it was made. Traditional rifles were often beautifully crafted bits of wood and forged steel, which is lovely, but also slow and expensive to produce. The STG-44, on the other hand, made extensive use of stamped steel parts. This meant it could be churned out much more quickly and cheaply than older designs. When you're in the middle of a massive war and resources and skilled labor are scarce, being able to make weapons faster is a huge bonus. Section 5, the Kurz cartridge, the absolute secret sauce. Now, we've talked about the gun itself, its clever stampings and its rather useful 30-round magazine, but the real, true, unadulterated genius of the STG-44, the thing that made it all possible, wasn't the rifle itself. No, it was the ammunition it fired, the 7.92x33 mm Kurz. Kurz, as any German speaker will tell you, means short, and this little cartridge was the key that unlocked the door to the entire assault rifle concept. Without it, the STG-44 would have just been another interesting but ultimately flawed experiment. It was, quite literally, the secret sauce. You see, traditional rifle cartridges, like the German 7.92x 57mm Mauser, were seriously powerful, designed to reach out and touch someone at 1,000 meters, which is great if you're a sniper, or if wars were fought by people standing very far apart and taking careful aim. But most firefights, especially in World War II, happened at much closer ranges, typically under 300 meters. At those distances, all that power was a bit of a waste. It also meant a lot of recoil, making the rifle hard to control in rapid fire, let alone full auto. Section 6. Rewriting the combat manual. New gun, new rules. So you've got this new rifle, the STG-44, with its select fire capability and its just right Kurtz cartridge. What does that actually mean on the battlefield? Well, it means you have to tear up the old rulebook and write a new one. Because suddenly the average German soldier, if he was lucky enough to get his hands on an STG-44, could do things he simply couldn't do before. He could lay down a much greater volume of accurate fire than a man with a bolt-action rifle, and at greater ranges than a man with a submachine gun. He became a much more dangerous, much more versatile opponent. Squad tactics had to change to make the most of this new capability. With STG-44s in the mix, squads could be more aggressive, more mobile. They had organic, portable firepower that could suppress enemy positions effectively while other elements maneuvered. Before, you might have needed a separate light machine gun team to do that job. Now, several individuals in the squad could provide that kind of covering fire. Section 7. The sincerest form of flattery. Imitation is everywhere. When the war finally ground to a halt in 1945, the STG-44 hadn't been produced in nearly enough numbers to change the ultimate outcome. Germany lost. But the ideas embodied in their storm rifle most certainly did not go unnoticed by the victorious Allies, or indeed by anyone else paying attention to military technology. The STG-44 was a bit like a concept car that actually worked and worked brilliantly, and like all brilliant ideas, it was ripe for, shall we say, inspiration. The sincerest form of flattery, as they say, is imitation, and the STG-44 was about to be very, very flattered. The Russians in particular had encountered the STG-44 on the Eastern Front and were suitably impressed, or more accurately, suitably worried by its effectiveness. They captured examples, studied them intently, and one can imagine their engineers saying, "Da, this is a very good idea, we should have something like this." But Russian, and better. And so a certain Sergeant Mikhail Kalashnikov, who was already working on new firearm designs, undoubtedly took a long, hard look at the STG-44's principles. Section 8. From battlefield to museum piece, its service and afterlife. Despite its revolutionary design, the STG-44 arrived too late and in too few numbers to turn the tide of World War II for Germany. Production was hampered by bombing raids, material shortages, and the general chaos of a collapsing regime. Estimates vary, but something around 425,000 STG-44s were produced. That might sound like a lot, but in the grand scheme of a war that consumed millions of weapons, it was a relative drop in the ocean. Most of its service was seen on the brutal Eastern Front, where German forces were desperately trying to hold back the Soviet juggernaut. Where it was issued, however, the STG-44 was generally very well received by the soldiers who used it. It gave them a tangible advantage in firepower over their opponents, who were still predominantly armed with bolt-action rifles or submachine guns. Section 9, still making waves, the STG-44's enduring shadow. So here we are in 2025, the STG-44 is an 80-year-old design. Is it just a dusty relic now, something for old blokes to get misty-eyed about at gun shows? Or does it still matter? Well, I'd argue it matters enormously. You see that the STG-44 isn't just important for what it was, it's important for what it started. Its DNA is present in virtually every single assault rifle that has come after it. The fundamental concept, an intermediate cartridge, select fire capability, a detachable magazine designed for effective use by the common soldier. That's the STG-44's enduring gift to the world of firearms. Every time you see a soldier carrying an M4, an AK-74, an SA-80, or any modern military rifle, you're looking at a descendant of the Sturmgewehr, They might look different, use more advanced materials, have fancy optics and lasers bolted on, but the core idea, the very essence of what makes them an assault rifle, can be traced directly back to those German engineers in the 1940s. The STG-44 was the blueprint.